And we are live. Look who it is. It's Ann, as it says right at the bottom of the screen. How you doing, Ann?
I was going to say it's Kip. That way, I guess. That way.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Figure these things out. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
And we're excited that you're going to be keynoting the Digital Summit at Home on content and social later this month, the 24th through the 26th. Yes. We're selling a lot of passes. We're excited. I think it's a topic people are really honing in on. It's an important topic. Lots to cover. So out of the gate, what we'd love to ask you, your thoughts on that theme, content and social, and you're going to be a keynote this month. So tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, digital summits are always such a good time, and I think in person was always fantastic. Online is going to be just as good because we still are going to bring it. So yeah, content and social. I mean, it's interesting. I'm happy to hear that tickets are selling and that there's a lot of interest in it. And it makes sense though, right? Because I think in this environment in which we find ourselves doing business, that that this is as close as Kip and I can actually get to having a conversation in person. Here on Facebook is an indicator of just how important content and social is, right? It's literally the lifeline for so many businesses right now. We used to be able to go into customers' offices. We used to be able to prospect at trade shows, and none of that is going on anymore. It's all off the table. So in an environment like that, what can we do? We can think about how are we using content marketing and social media a whole lot more effectively as part of how we're telling our story. How can we actually differentiate through our content and through our social? So it's more important now, not less. And I actually see that as a really good thing, obviously, as somebody who cares deeply about content marketing, who really values the role that storytelling plays. So yeah, for all of those reasons, I'm not surprised to hear that it's going so well for you all.
I dig it, and we'll dive into some of those things here in a little bit. I'm getting some feedback. Oh, it's gone now. One of the things let's segue into. I noticed on your blog you talked about virtual events, and you were saying with our upcoming summit this month, I wanted to touch on something you wrote about in conjunction with live and versus just getting the recordings later.
Yeah,
which we notice is a trend, right? People are busy, they multitask. They're like, I just get the recordings later. But you were talking about how content needs a trigger to inspire action in the context of things might just happen in a virtual event that just doesn't have that same feel when you were doing the recording. So talk about that a little bit. Like, what are some of the trends you guys are seeing at MarketingProfs around the virtual events or other virtual events you've attended?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, everybody is doing virtual events now, right? And when I think about the events that I've either produced or the ones that I've participated in, I think the most important thing is to think about what you just said. Like, there's got to be some element of live. There's going to be some live component. I mean, I'm really happy that Digital Summit content and social is live. At least for me as keynote, are all your speakers live at the event?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's really important because, why is that? It's because we all say, oh yeah, if I can watch that later, I will. The reality is we're all busy. We never do, right? It's like, we just somehow never get to it. And because you can, you just don't. Like, there's a weird psychology there. And so you do need some sort of live trigger to action, so to speak. And I do think that it makes the event more exciting. It makes it feel more like it has a pulse. At MarketingProfs, the way that we did most of our sessions was that we had, most of them were recorded, but we had the speaker there live. And so what happened is at the very beginning, the speaker came on camera, was like, hey, thanks for being here. I'm going to be interacting with you in the chat. And there was no pretense to, like, we're not going to pretend that this is live, right? And then we ran the session, which was all pre-recorded. Again, we told the audience straight up front because, we're trying to be completely transparent. I just think as a way of doing business, that's really important. And then at the end, turn the cameras on, and the speaker, from the speaker standpoint, it's valuable because the speaker now knows what resonated, what didn't, what was confusing, because he or she was participating right there in chat. And then from the attendee standpoint, it's just kind of cool to know that, yeah, this is pre-recorded, but there is this live component to it, and so you want to be part of that. It's hard to create an experience with a recorded, 100% recorded program, I think, anyway, based on what I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. And we've even tried to encourage people, because you can't see, big part of speaking, which you've done a lot, is you see the audience. You can tell when they're reacting. Do they get the joke, or did that slide work the way you thought it did? And so we try to encourage the audience to, use the exclamation mark or emojis or the clap feature if you have it on the platform, just to give that feedback.
Right. It's interesting too, because in some ways it's not as what's the word? It's not as intimate, right? Because you're not, like, to your point, you're not seeing people's faces, and you're not part of a shared experience altogether in the same environment, in the same room. But in other ways, I actually think it's more intimate, because it's 1-to-1. It's truly 1-to-1. Like, your audience, for the most part, is not, they're not all sitting in a room together. So what does that mean? It means that it's just me speaking to you right now in your office. And so in some ways it's a little bit more intimate. And so when I do my presentations, I try to pull that in. I try to acknowledge the fact that, it's not one-to-many, like a speaker on stage to many in the audience. It's 1-to-1. It's me standing in my tiny house office in my backyard. I just had to trek through 2 feet of snow to get here. And I'm speaking directly to you in your home office, where you might have kids in the next room on Zoom school, or I don't know what your challenges are outside of snow if you're here in the Northeast. But so there is this sort of intimacy. It's because it's just me speaking to you directly. It's like it is 1-to-1. Right. So I do think there are ways that we can. I'm looking down at my puppy here. There are ways to leverage it, a little bit more effectively, and not treat it like it's. Like, I think the mistake that a lot of event producers make is that they treat it as, like, we're going to take our live program and we're just going to, like, plop it in the middle of a virtual platform. That just doesn't work. You got to think about how can we actually create a more engaging experience. Like you mentioned, like polls and doodling and all the fun stuff that you guys incorporate. Yeah,
and it's been quite the learning adventure too. But I guess that's what an adventure is, right? It's a chance to learn.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I'm in Ohio, so we've got the snow here too. Not quite 2 feet, but if you had to trek, I'm assuming you're not wearing the cool checkerboard bands I saw on your Instagram.
Oh my goodness! Would you like to see what I actually have on? You will laugh.
Yeah, let's see it.
Yeah, you guys will laugh. Are you ready? Look at these boots.
That, ladies and gentlemen, that is how Ann Handley treks through 2 feet of snow to her tiny house.
Yeah, look at those. Those are giant. Look at that. You got to see the bottoms. The bottoms are fantastic. Look at this.
Those are legit.
Those legit moon boots. Yeah.
That's serious New Englander footwear right there. You guys
just saw something that I never show, but I show. Not only can you see that I have sweatpants on, but you can see that I have these, like, fantastic, ridiculous marshmallow boots. So
yeah. Well, I think that's something that Jamie kind of turned me on to, was like checking out your Instagram feed, and it seems like you kind of use that a little bit to showcase a little bit more of your personality. Is that would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I think Instagram is inherently a more playful platform, and so when I think about the best way to use Instagram, for me as a speaker and professional, but also, almost for any brand out there, and I use the word brand pretty liberally. I think for any one of us, any company, using Instagram as a way to, be a little bit playful with your audience. So yes, show who you are, what you do as a professional. So I'll share, me, I'll promote like my speaking stuff on there, or, MarketingProfs or whatever the case may be. But I also use it as a way to sort of show a little bit of behind the scenes. So the one that you're talking about is when I had my daughter's Vans on, and like I looked really great from here up, well, as great as I can get from here up. And then below was just real hot mess. It was like, Lily Pulitzer shorts with a crazy pattern and Vans. It's like nothing made sense. This does not make sense. But I think showing some of those more human moments are just, that's what Instagram is all about. And I think to varying degrees, that's what social is all about. Not necessarily always leaning into like the fun, playful moments, but, just showing a little bit of an unscripted behind the scenes, more relatable kind of content.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit from Instagram, which is more visual. Let's talk about Clubhouse, which is audio.
Oh, yeah.
And so I understand you've been on Clubhouse for a few months now.
Yeah, actually, well, just about 6 weeks, I guess. Are you on Clubhouse, first of all?
I just recently got on there, yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Are we following each other, I hope?
I'm not sure. We need to hook that up.
We need to do it. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So, I love this. I love this tweet that I saw somebody say about Clubhouse. He said that Clubhouse is like people who raise their hands at a conference, but then say, "I have more of a statement than a question." Very accurate.
That's actually fair. That is fair. Yeah, Clubhouse is interesting. That's really a funny comment. I do think, by the way, the Clubhouse is I saw this headline in I think it was Fast Company yesterday or one day this week. I think it was Fast Company. It was like Clubhouse is for people who really, really miss conferences. And I do think that there's an element of that that's 100% true. So I'll talk about it from a couple of different standpoints. First of all, for me personally, so I got on Clubhouse right around Christmas, something like that, right around Christmas time. And then I sort of just lurked for a while, just sort of popped in, popped out. And the thing that that resonates with me on Clubhouse, and for those of you who don't know, Clubhouse is a social app. It's social audio. It's all audio. You don't see people's faces. There's no video. Nothing is recorded. So think of it as kind of like, there's a couple ways to think of it. It's like a big party line, but it's also kind of like a live podcast, in which it's not recorded at all, and people can pop in and they're invited to be on stage alongside the speakers, so that they can also, like, you can hear them asking questions, you can hear them participating. And so sometimes there'll be like, these rooms will go on for hours, some of them. And some of them will have like thousands of people in it, but also at the same time, others are not that long and there are only 20 people in there. So I've experienced both. And so for me, professionally and personally, it does fill that gap to connecting with my colleagues and connecting with other people, much the way that you feel inspired and kind of filled up at a conference. That's the feeling I get from Clubhouse. Like when you're in a really good Clubhouse room. And so I'll give you an example. Like last weekend, I did a Clubhouse on trends in content marketing. It was led by Mike Stelzner of Social Media Marketing World, Social Media Exam.
I was eavesdropping on that one.
Okay, so you were there. So you remember who was on stage? It was me. It was Joe Polizzi. It was Robert Rose. It was Mitch Joel. It was Mark Schaefer. And I think that's it. But I mean, that collection of people would never be together all on stage. It was basically like a big panel. Joe is also keynoting at this event, I believe, right?
Correct. Yes, he is. He's going to come up this month. And Robert will be there too.
Oh, good. So that was just a very special environment. Like for me, I was like, forget about the audience for a second. Like for me, that was just really wonderful to hear my friends and to talk to them and to get the points of view on things. So that was fantastic. So I think that's where it really fills the gap for me. The other thing that I think is interesting about it is that it's kind of like a playground. It's like when you're a kid, you get out of the playground and you never knew who was going to be there. Sometimes you play a really great pickup game and sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes you just be like, swing on the swings and go home. So that's kind of how Clubhouse is too. It has that kind of vibe to it. Like you get there some days and and yes, people schedule stuff, but that's not really how my life works. So I'm not using it that way at this point. So just go in and see who's there. So
was the one on Saturday with who did you say was the moderator?
Mike Stelzner, Social Media World.
Yeah, from Social Media. With that one with Mike, that wasn't scheduled. Was that spontaneous?
He had scheduled it with Robert and with Joe. I'm pretty certain they had planned it, but I just happened to show up. I was like, I got a notification on my phone. It's like, Mike is talking about content marketing trends. I popped up on my mobile, and I was like, oh, that sounds fun. Let me pop in. So I popped in. It turns out like that all those guys were there, and I was like, hey. So yeah, it was very serendipitous, and the serendipity of Clubhouse is something that I really love. And it's also new, and it's filling a gap at a point where all of us are so sick of being isolated and so sick of like being in this little, in my case, like my own home office, that I definitely am craving that kind of interaction. So that's nice. From a brand standpoint, though, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say what I was gonna ask you. What do you think about like brands being on?
Yeah. So from a brand standpoint, I do think that brands who have some sort of audio component to their content marketing strategy plan, I think it's a great place to experiment right now, precisely because the world is so small there. Like it's invite only, so it's growing exponentially, but it's also growing in a sort of controlled way. And so it's just an opportunity, I think, to sort of have some fun and experiment with some things. This morning, I was on there and I was just curious, like sort of clicking around in the categories to see like from a brand standpoint, who is actually here. So there's a lot of sports marketing brands there. There's a lot of sports teams that are there. So if you're into sports marketing, that's a great opportunity. In terms of tourism, there's not a lot. Like I think the, who did I see there? Was it Memphis? No, Nashville. It was Nashville. Like the Nashville, like, I don't know, city of Nashville, like has a.
That's an interesting vertical.
Yeah. And so you can sort of see, like they're doing like tourism right now, right? Devastated, right? So they're doing regular chats. Let's talk about like music and how is music education happening. And so scheduling chats like that, restaurant marketing, I think is another opportunity, so I think there's definitely a brand play, and it's a good time, again, not to just to play around a little bit, just to go in and see like what's what. I think there always has to be that element of experimentation in your content marketing program, because you can't just, content and social are not set it and forget it, right? It's think about what are our goals, what's our strategy, but I always want to leave a little room for some play in there.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that will be interesting with mediums like that is, I was on the brand side for a long time, and brands love to control everything. Yeah. Right? Like the lighting's got to be perfect, and it's taken a while for brands to be like, you know what, it's okay if we shoot video on an iPhone and put it online. It's taken a while for them to get comfortable with that, and it'll be curious if brands migrate to that medium, which they will eventually. I mean, if there's a chance to market your product, brands are going to figure out what they do.
Yeah, it's true.
And will they try to be too structured, or will they be comfortable with the conversational kind of style of the medium? It'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that's one of the things that's come out of the pandemic, at least, and maybe this is just my hopeful little heart that wants this to be true, but I do see some evidence of it in that brands being a little bit more comfortable with being less buttoned up. I think, like I've shared this story in the past, but, Arnie Sorensen, when he had to furlough and Marriott had to furlough all of their associates, like right at the beginning of the pandemic, almost a year ago, and the way that he got on camera and spoke for 5 minutes from his heart just about how devastating this was and what the plan was going forward. And, there was real emotion that was welling up within him. And the fact that Marriott Corporation, this massive entity, right, put this major hospitality brand, the fact that they put it out onto Twitter, onto social, and they were good with it. It's like, that was such, like, in my mind, was such a watershed moment, because to me, that was a real turning point, right? It's like, yes, we've seen elements of brands being more human, so to speak, before, right. But that was such a tremendous moment. And so, my hope is that actually has ushered in a little bit more empathy, like from a brand standpoint, just about how they're communicating with the people that matter to them. And, I think just at a macro level, we see this in, as we're all doing business, right? I see like my colleagues, and I see on Zoom sort of what their challenges are. And so we all have a sort of a different appreciation, I think, for what we all are dealing with, not only on this pandemic, but just as people. And so I hope that ultimately translates into how we're communicating with customers and how we're marketing.
Yeah, that's good. That's great advice. Like as you're saying that, I can't help but think of, so my mind on Clubhouse goes to like, it feels a little bit like eavesdropping, but a brand that just naturally seems like it makes sense in a kitschy kind of way would be like, remember E.F. Hutton? So I was like, oh, when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. But could you imagine the financial advisors having a real conversation with someone who might be going through financial hardship right now? Yeah. And it brings that real element to, that's what it would be like to have a financial advisor, like get you through these hard times.
Yeah, right. And we have seen a little bit of that. Like we've seen it on Facebook Lives to some degree.
Sure, right.
Twitter chats. But I think, especially because none of this, at least right now, I do think that's changing, because I've been to a few like town halls on Clubhouse where the co-founders of Clubhouse are saying that there are things that will change. And one of those things that may change is the ability to record conversations there. So right now, nothing is recorded unless it's a very specific, like unless everyone opts into it specifically and you're doing it externally, basically is the only way to do it. And so that may change, but at least right now, nothing is being recorded, and so that may be actually a little bit more comfortable for some brands, knowing that once they say it, once the room is closed, like, it disappears, at least theoretically.
Yeah, that's the one option for me where I'm like, oh, why aren't these recorded? But I think every one of these mediums, as they get popularity and people figure it out, it goes through almost that same maturity cycle.
Yes.
Right. Or they get bought by someone, like Instagram got bought by Facebook, or they just they grow to be to that maturity level, and then monetization comes along, because eventually investors want to know how we're going to make money.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to watch Clubhouse to go through that growth cycle.
Yeah. Although and I know we're sort of framing this around Clubhouse, but Twitter is about to launch Twitter Spaces. They're already rolling it out in beta. So it's basically a Clubhouse, copycat, and that'll be interesting because, so many of us, me included, and you in Digital Summit, we already have our presence on Twitter, right? We already have built our networks there. And so to be able to layer on social audio is interesting. So as much as we're talking about Clubhouse specifically, I also think that really what we're talking about more broadly is just the rise of social audio. Mm-hmm. And I think that's definitely, here to stay. I think it's a really interesting way to communicate. And I think it sort of also removes this, we're all sick of being on video, and it's kind of a relief in terms of how it'll affect, what will be the trajectory and the growth long-term, post-pandemic. I mean, I don't know, but right now I do think it's an interesting thing for brands to be looking at, especially because it's so new and it's so different.
Do you see a question just came up in my mind about Clubhouse? Do you think we're gonna see a growth of influencers just in that platform, like we do on TikTok and YouTube, etc.? Or do you think it's gonna have to gravitate someone who's already got that voice in that audience to Clubhouse?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of both. It's already happening where you already see people there, and it's how did they get 300,000 followers? This platform launched last week, didn't it? I mean, that's not true. It actually launched last year, but no, I think we're already seeing that. I also think it'll be interesting to see, will we see voice talent, suddenly increase? Will we see people, brands partnering with voice talent, somebody who has the ability to moderate really well. There are some really fantastic moderators on Clubhouse, because that's kind of key to it. You've got to have somebody in the room who, who's leading it, who really knows when to call on people, when to shut them down, how to manage the room. It's not an easy thing, so.
We saw that in the first presidential debate, that moderating is definitely an art.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of the arts, I wanted to, so I like to, I read quite a bit. I'm sure you do as a writer. You read tons of books. I see them behind you there. Yeah. And so one that I read recently, I don't know if you've read Dan Rather's book, What Unites Us?
No, I haven't. I would love to.
And I love Dan Rather, and just because everybody's talking about the country being so divided right now, it was a title that sort of grabbed me, and I snagged it. And I like to highlight certain things that I want to reference later. And here's a quote from his book. So Dan breaks down each chapter into things that we all have in common, right? As far as enough trying to find things that make us so divisive. What are the things that we all can agree on? Books is actually one of the chapters, but he's talking about the arts as well. And I just want to share this quote really quick, because I think it ties up some of the things we're talking about here as far as the content in these mediums. But Dan says, art is an attempt to capture the truths of the world as you see it in a medium you can share with others. It's about lending your voice. And I just love that quote. When I read it, I went back and I read it again, I highlighted it. And I just love that there are two things there, which we could capture. There's the kind of art to marketing, which is what you're really good at. The medium and the voice. And I think that whole voice thing with Clubhouse, et cetera, I think there's something to that, right? Because you're obviously really good at the written word, but there's a key element of that with the voice. But I just think that medium and the art was something that was really, really kind of caught me there. Yeah,
that's really good. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, that's fantastic. I was also just thinking about what you were talking about, or just a few minutes ago when we were talking about, just so I was telling that story about Arnie Sorensen with Marriott. I mean, think about how there's really nothing more authentic than a human voice, especially in a Clubhouse or in a social audio environment in an unscripted way. There is no script. It's not like podcasting where you might get the questions ahead of time. And so there is that element of an art to it, essentially. And from a brand standpoint, it's an interesting way to really show people who you are, to showcase the people within your company, and to show up in a way that's inherently human.
Yeah. And one of the things I kind of wanted to kind of point out as we were talking about these newer platforms is, I was at Scott's for a long time as far as the brand side, and we were, as a history of the company, we published a magazine, we had books. So content marketing's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Betty Crocker, did recipe cookbooks, etc. But it costs, money to do that. But now you've lowered that bar with some of these mediums that are available. It's easy to get a blog going. So I just wanted to kind of point that out as far as like our conference coming up this month on content, and why this is it seems like it's such a hot topic, but it's really been around for a while.
Yeah, no, it totally has. Content Rules, my first book came out 10 years ago. So yeah, it's in that's in the modern incarnation of it, and it certainly wasn't the first book on content marketing, but in terms of how we think about content in a marketing context now, the tools are so much more accessible, to your point. SEO became part of the equation in a way. Mm-hmm. It was never part of the equation back when Betty Crocker was publishing cookbooks, or when the Michelin Guide was publishing their Michelin Guide to restaurants. Like, none of that was part of it. So there's a lot of reasons why it's fueling its modern growth, and I think it's only getting more and more and more important to brands. And I almost think of it now as almost, when you think about what is content marketing, it's to me, it really is just marketing. All the things we're talking about here today, right. I wouldn't necessarily put them separate from any other marketing tactic, right? It's all wrapped up in marketing. And that's another thing that I think we've seen increasingly more and more, just that it's not something that that's the content team over there. Instead, it's all one. It's all aligned with other functions within marketing.
Fantastic. So we're running up on the end. We kind of keep these about half hour or less, and we haven't had a dog cameo.
Oh man, I've been waiting.
Let's do it.
He just fell asleep, but that's okay because
That's all right. Wake up the fur baby.
He's sitting here. He's sitting here under the heat. So this is my little pal. His name is August.
What's his name?
He's August.
August.
We call him Augie. He's a cat. He's so sleepy right now. Look at how good he is with his angles, though. He knows where the camera is at all times. It's fantastic.
He does. Very photogenic.
Yeah, he's 7 months old today. Actually, he's a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, and he looks massive, but it's really just the angle. He's 11 pounds, so he's not a very big boy, but he's very furry. So I think 2 of those pounds are basically fur.
It's ironic that his name's August, and you got 2 feet of snow on the ground.
Yes, I know. It's also ironic that his name is August, but he was born in July. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. And so now I'm just sick of explaining it now. So people will say, "Oh, because he's born in August," and I'm like, "Sure." It's just easier.
Yeah, you got me.
He's a wonderful little boy, though. You can follow him on Instagram, by the way. He has his own Instagram account, so it's called Littlest August. So highly encouraged. He's very entertaining.
We'll have to check it out.
He's very good with content marketing, so
I can tell. All right, back to the heater.
Back to the heater. Yeah, he's bye.
And this was great. We look forward to seeing you later this month at the Digital Summit at Home.
Yeah, I will see
Absolutely.
you all. With 2 weeks or 2 weeks from today. Is that what it is?
Yeah. 2 weeks from the month.
Fantastic.
All right, we're gonna close out the broadcast.
All right, thank you.